In this episode, we're going to talk about what is that cheesy funk you're tasting in your tequila, right here on the Tequila Hombre. Coming up next. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Tequila Hombre. If you're new to the Tequila Hombre channel, welcome. I'm all about not telling you what you should drink or what you shouldn't drink, but more about educating as to what you are drinking so you can make that decision for yourself. In this episode, we're going to be talking about what causes that funk, that cheesy funk flavor in your tequila, because it's important for you to know what's in your tequila and what's causing that funky cheese flavor. So we're going to dive down deep into that. And if you want to get more information about this type of stuff too, make sure you check out the Hombre Cave podcast. I give this stuff away for free. I don't get paid to do commercials. I don't get paid to do advertising for brands. I give this information away for free. It's stuff that I found out myself through research that I think consumers should know to make you a more powerful, more educated consumer. So let's not waste any time. Let's get to talking about that cheesy funk in tequila. All right, for those of you that have been around tequila for a little while, maybe not, but you've picked up a bottle of something and go, why does it taste like blue cheese? Or why does it have this cheesy funkiness to it? One example of that, if you've been around long enough to try the original Cascanes Joven, this was a super cheesy, funky Joven. There's a big story behind this. I actually helped them develop this Joven because the original Blanco that came out was undrinkable originally. And so we had to figure out something to do with it to make it where it was more palatable for people. So there's a good story behind how I worked with John Paul Fortunati at Cascanes to develop the flavor profile for this original Joven. And those of you that had a chance to try this original Joven, you know what I'm talking about. It was super funky on the nose and stuff, but we blended it and made it so the flavor was actually really delicious. Some other brands you probably tried that may have that cheesy funk to it. Atanasio is one that's known as having a funky nose, a funky flavor to it. And it's not a coincidence that Cascanes that had the same cheesy funkiness came from the same distillery. Also, Caballito Cerrero, some of theirs is known to have that super cheesy funkiness to it. The Muerto from Siempre had the cheesy funkiness to it, as well as some other expressions from other brands, from other distilleries. I'm sure if you've tried a tequila you thought had a cheesy funk to it, comment below and let me know which ones you've tried that you were wondering about the cheesy funkiness to it. And now let's talk about what causes that cheesy funkiness. Okay, so what you've been told to believe is that the cheesy funkiness that you get comes from malolactic fermentation. That is not accurate. Now, the reason being, malolactic fermentation uses a different bacteria. And when malolactic fermentation happens, what basically happens and what's called malolactic fermentation is this bacteria will go into the must. It does it in wine must as well as in agave must, since they're practically identical, except for, of course, the flavor compounds and stuff. So the bacteria will go into the must and it consumes malic acid. Now, malic acid has kind of a sour apple kind of flavor profile to it, right? So it'll convert that malic acid into lactic acid. That's why it's called malolactic. So it converts malic acid into lactic acid. And when it does so, it creates a compound called diacetyl. And diacetyl gives it a buttery flavor to it, kind of a buttery, and it rounds out the acid in wine and in the must as well, and will give it kind of a smoother taste to it. That's why red wines go through malolactic fermentation. And some Chardonnays, if you've tried a buttery Chardonnay, and I really like buttery Chardonnays, that's because that Chardonnay went through a malolactic fermentation, where most Chardonnays on the market, they don't put them through malolactic fermentation because they want that crisp green apple flavor and stuff in them. But ones like Rombauer is known for putting their Chardonnay through malolactic fermentation and then oaking it, so you get a buttery, oaky flavor to it. Same type of thing with tequila. When the malolactic fermentation happens, it converts the malic acid to lactic acid and then creates a buttery richer flavor profile, but it won't add that funkiness. The funkiness comes from something completely different. So what is the funkiness from? Well, it's from a different bacteria called Lactobacillus. Now, Lactobacillus is in the air, and it's not a dangerous bacteria by any means. It's in a lot of food that we know of. So if you've recognized some of the flavors and stuff from it, it's because Lactobacillus is in food, fermented foods like yogurt, like sauerkraut, like kimchi, pickles, and even sourdough bread have Lactobacillus in it. So that's where that funkiness comes from, is it's from actual Lactobacillus infection. And a lot of times it happens when they do open air fermentation and then also don't do a good job with sanitizing and cleaning their distillery after each batch. So what happens is sometimes some distilleries will actually impart a Lactobacillus infection in the tequila right away because they have an infection in their pipes, and that becomes their house flavor. So if you've ever tried certain tequilas from a distillery and you go, for some reason, all the tequilas I try from this distillery have this funky cheesiness to it, it's because they have a Lactobacillus infection in their distillery that they haven't sanitized out yet. So that is not something that's supposed to be like in a true clean fermentation. It's something that happens from really not paying attention and not monitoring your fermentation well enough. You get that cheesy, funky flavor to it. So how is a malolactic and Lactobacillus infection different? Well, when malolactic fermentation happens, like I said before, the bacteria that infects the must, that's in the must, will actually consume malic acid and convert it to lactic acid. The Lactobacillus goes after a different source of food. It goes after the residual sugars in the fermentation. So when fermentation's complete, it's never all done where all the sugars are done. And the must for tequila is really high in fructose. And Lactobacillus loves fructose. So it will get into the must. It will consume the residual fructose. Even after the fermentation is complete, as soon as the things kind of settle down and there's no more carbon dioxide environment, happening in the must, it starts consuming the carbohydrates, the fructose in the must, and converting that to lactic acid. So they do the same thing in converting what they're eating to lactic acid, but the Lactobacillus works on carbohydrates, where the bacteria that is used for malolactic fermentation works on the malic acid. All right, so now you're probably wondering, well, how can a distillery prevent a Lactobacillus infection from happening? Well, if they have an open tank fermentation system with open air fermentation, the best way to do it is while there's an active fermentation going, because when there's an active fermentation going, the fermentation creates carbon dioxide, it creates heat, and it creates alcohol. Now, carbon dioxide creates a barrier on top of the must that prevents things like Lactobacillus from infecting the mosto, because Lactobacillus needs oxygen in order to live and to thrive. So CO2 is actually heavier than oxygen, and it forces the oxygen out of the must and out of the top of the mosto and keeps it an anaerobic environment. So you want to preserve that by transferring it before it's complete into a closed tank. But you want to make sure the closed tank has a blow-off valve that allows the carbon dioxide to escape, but not let any oxygen in. And it'll do that because as it's producing more carbon dioxide, it'll let the carbon dioxide out, but also keep a barrier on top of the must that will prevent Lactobacillus from infecting the must. So that's one way. And then what you do is you can actually let it sit in that tank for a long time and keep a CO2 environment on top of it and let things settle down and develop more flavors before you need to go into the still for distillation. It could actually sit in that tank for a while, for months, before it needs to move into the still for fermentation, because it's an oxygenless anaerobic environment. Now, if you want to just not have to worry about that at all, then you want to use a closed fermentation tank system. So a fermentation tank with a lid with a blow-off valve. And there's actually a distillery that's being built now where all of the fermenters are closed fermentation. And I've been talking to them, and we're going to work out and do a special project, which I'm really excited about. But it's a closed fermentation system. So from the beginning, all the fermentation happens in a closed environment, which after the yeast take off and start fermenting, it'll create a CO2 environment inside the tank, which prevents any lactobacillus from the air, any breezes from the stuff blowing around from getting into the mosto and infecting it and causing some of these funky, cheesy flavors. Now, one of the beautiful things about keeping in a closed tank system is even though there's no oxygen, the bacteria that will need to process the malic acid to convert it to lactic acid, do malolactic fermentation, actually works in an anaerobic environment. So it can actually still go through malolactic fermentation and create that rounder, more buttery flavor profile and more buttery, rounded palate that we want to see in a good tequila because, that bacteria doesn't need oxygen to thrive and will work and will actually do malolactic fermentation while it sits in a closed tank environment. So the last thing people ask as well is a lactobacillus infection bad for us? Can it cause problems? Not really, because lactobacillus, like I said before, is in foods that we eat every day. It's actually part of our probiotic digestion health as well. You can find it in yogurt, in sauerkraut, kimchi, and pickles, and sourdough bread. So it's in food that we eat, so it's not going to hurt you. It just creates that really interesting, cheesy, musty, funky kind of flavor profile that some of us may not like and some of us may endear. So that's how you get the funkiness in your tequila. Well, hopefully you liked the information I shared in this video. We kind of got a little technical on you, and we're going to get more and more technical as I try to educate you more on what you're tasting and what's involved in the production of tequila. And for more information, if you want to dive deeper and hear more detailed information on stuff like this, make sure you check out the Hombre Cave podcast on the Hombre Cave YouTube channel, or you can find it on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on iHeartRadio Podcast, as well as just about any place that you can find your podcasts. If you like the information I shared in this video, make sure you click the thumbs up and give me a like. I know we got real technical and stuff, and I've got lots of great information coming up for you. So if you're looking for unbiased reviews and honest, unbiased informational videos, you've come to the right place. Make sure you click the subscribe button right there and the notification bell next to it so you get notified every time I post a new informational video, an unbiased review that will help you and knowing what you're drinking so you can make better choices as to what you're going to buy when shopping for tequila, either online or at the store. And like I always say, life is too short to drink bad tequila. So hey, keep following me here on the Hombre channel. Make sure you subscribe, click the like button, click follow on Instagram and everything, and I'll get you as much information as I can that will help you in becoming more informed consumers. Salute. Bye, guys.